Hello everyone, welcome to lecture 11. The plan for this lecture is as follows. In this lecture we will discuss about the practical instantiations of pseudo random generators, namely we will see the construction based on linear feedback shift register and RC4, and we will discuss about the recent developments in the area of practical instantiations of pseudo random generator. The reason we call these instantiations as practical is that they are super fast compared to the provably secure constructions of pseudo random generators that we had discussed in the last lecture based on one way function and one way permutation. However, unfortunately for these practical instantiations of pseudo random generators, we do not have any mathematical proof that they are indeed pseudo random generators. That means, we do not have the theorem statement which proves that hey, there is no polynomial time distinguisher who can distinguish the output of this random number generators from the output of a true random number generator. It is only because since their construction of these practical instantiations of PRGs, we have not found any suitable attack or any suitable distinguisher, and that is why we believe that these constructions are secure. Whereas for the provably secure constructions based on one way function and hard code predicate, which we have discussed in the last lecture, we have a mathematical proof that indeed they are secure in the sense there exists no polynomial time distinguisher to distinguish the output of those algorithms from the output of the corresponding true random number generator. So, in practice, wherever you have a cryptographic construction where you want to instantiate a pseudo random generator, we actually go for these practical instantiations. So, in all the practical instantiations of pseudo random generators, we can follow the following extraction. So, imagine you are given a pseudo random generator which expands an input of little l bits to an output of big L bits, right. We can assume that the pseudo random generator consists of a pair of algorithms, namely an initialization algorithm and the get next bit algorithm. And what basically this algorithm does are as follows. So, the init algorithm, it is actually an initialization algorithm which sets the initial state of your algorithm, and it is a deterministic function, and it takes the seed for the algorithm G as the input, and along with that an optional initialization vector. So, this initialization vector is optional. It is not necessary that every practical instantiation of pseudo random generator should take this initialization vector. It depends upon the underlying construction. However, if the IV is taken as given as an input, then it is publicly known. And based on the seed and the IV, the initialization algorithm produces an initial state of the algorithm which we denote by ST0. Now, the get next bit algorithm does the following. It takes the current state of your algorithm or the PRG, which I denote by STI, and it updates the state to STI plus 1, and along with that it produces the next output bit of your algorithm G, right. So, if you want to generate a sequence of bits, what we do is we do the initialization algorithm, get the initial state ST0, and say if you are interested in getting an output of big L bits, basically we invoke this get next bit algorithm big L number of time in sequence, where in each invocation the state gets updated and the output bits keep on getting generated one by one, right. So, that is the abstraction which we can use to abstract out any practical instantiation of pseudo random generator. So, let us see the one popularly used practical instantiation of pseudo random generator which we use in the hardware, and this is called linear feedback shift register or LFSR. So, historically it was used as a PRG and it is very fast when implemented in hardware. However, it is not recommended to be used for critical applications because it is very easy for an adversary to recover the entire key by just seeing few output bits of the LFSR. Right. So, an LFSR of degree n basically consists of n registers denoted by S0 to Sn minus 1, and along with that it will have n feedback coefficients C0 to Cn minus 1, where the coefficients will be Boolean values. So, for example, here we have an LFSR of degree 4 consisting of 4 registers and the feedback coefficients are 0, 1, 0, 1. So, how an LFSR operates? So, as far as the state of an LFSR is considered, the state is nothing but the bit values which are stored in the individual register, right. So, if we take this particular example, then the state of the LFSR is nothing but a 4 bit string, namely the 4 bits stored in the registers S3, S2, S1 and S0. And update of the state happens as follows. After every clock cycle, the bit which is present in S0 is going to be produced as the output bit, and the contents of all the bits in the registers are right shift, right. As a result of that, what is going to happen is the current S1 will become the next S0, the current S2 will become the next S1 and so on, and as a result S3 will become empty, and the updated value of the last register, in this case S3, will be determined by taking an XOR of the subsets of the current bits of the state. It will be basically an XOR of the bits of the current state, and the subsets of the registers whose XOR we take is actually determined by the feedback coefficient. So, again in this example, since the feedback coefficient is 0 1 0 1, that means after every clock cycle, once we do the right shifting here, the value of S3 is nothing but the value of the current the XOR of the current S2 and the current S0. If we take the XOR, that will be the value which will be fed as the new value of S3, right. That is why the name linear feedback shift register. In each clock cycle, we shift the entire the contents of all the register by one position, that is why shift register, and linear feedback because we have a feedback loop which determines the value of the contents of Sn minus 1 in the next clock cycle, and this feedback function is a linear function of the current set of registers. That is why the name linear feedback shift register. So, for example, if we take this LFSR of degree 4 and suppose the initial state is 0 0 1 1, right, then after the first state everything will be shifted by one position, and as a result the bit 1 is going to be the first output bit, and the feedback which will be going into the LFSR for the next iteration will be 1, namely the XOR of the bit 0 and 1, because your feedback coefficients are 0 1 0 1, and as a result the next state of the LFSR will be 1 0 0 1. Again after the next clock cycle, the bit value 1 will be flushed out as the output, that will be the second output bit of your LFSR, and the feedback which will be going will be 1, and as a result your state will be updated to 1100 and so on. So, that is how an LFSR of degree n operates. Okay. Now, let us argue whether this LFSR is secure or not. That means, can we consider this LFSR to be a pseudo random generator, and a requirement from pseudo random generator is that if someone gives you the sample of an LFSR where you are not given the initial state of the algorithm, because if you are given the initial state of the LFSR, then you can actually compute all the output bits of the LFSR. So, imagine you are not given the input state of the LFSR, and along with that imagine you are not given the feedback coefficients as well, but you are given the degree of the LFSR, that means you know the number of registers that are used in the LFSR. Then is it possible for the attacker to compute or predict the outcome of the LFSR? It turns out that if we have an LFSR of degree n, then it can have at most 2 to the power n minus 1 non-zero states. And why we are interested in non-zero states? Because once LFSR occupies the states where the content of all the registers are 0, then after that it does not matter how many times or how many clock cycle we operate the LFSR, all the subsequent states will be 0. That means, once we reach an all 0 state, we should stop generating the outputs of LFSR. So, the interesting case is when we actually focus on the non-zero states of LFSR, and we define LFSR to be a maximum length LFSR if its output sequence repeats after exactly 2 to the power n minus 1 number of non-zero states. And interestingly, it turns out that it does not matter with what input state you start with. If you start with any non-zero initial state, then it is always possible to set the feedback coefficients in such a way that your LFSR actually becomes a maximum length LFSR. That means, starting with that non-zero initial state, you can go through all the 2 to the power n minus 1 non-zero state, and then only the sequence will repeat. So, imagine for the moment that you have a maximum length LFSR. Intuitively you might feel that all the n bit strings are going to be produced with equal frequency. Does that mean that your LFSR is a secure PRG? Because if the output state is going to be repeated after 2 to the power n minus 1 number of states, that means for an attacker he has to wait for 2 to the power n minus 1 number of states, which is an exponential amount of quantity, and hence it cannot distinguish the output of the LFSR from the output of a true random number generator. That could be your underlying intuition based on which you can declare your LFSR to be secure. But it turns out that that is not the case. For an LFSR of degree n, just by observing polynomial number of output bits, an adversary can recover the entire key, and once it recovers the entire key, it can recover or it can predict all the future output bits of the LFSR, right. So, imagine you are given an LFSR of degree n, where you do not know the feedback coefficients and you do not know the initial states of the LFSR. And imagine that the adversary has observed the first 2n output bits of the LFSR, which I denote by y1 to y2n, right. And the initial state, non-zero state of the LFSR is denoted by this. So, in the superscript I am putting 0 in the parenthesis, that denotes the 0th state of the LFSR, namely the initial state, right, and that is also unknown for the attacker. The attacker has seen only the first 2n output bits. Also, we assume that the adversary is not aware of the feedback coefficients. So, from the viewpoint of the adversary, it could be any subset of the n registers which are actually getting XORed to decide the feedback, right. So, the unknown coefficients Cn minus 1 to C0 are also there for the attacker. Now, it turns out that adversary knows the relationship that the initial state of the LFSR is nothing but the first n output bits that it has seen, because if you see the operation of the LFSR, after every clock cycle the content of S0 is actually coming out as the output, and after every clock cycle the new content of S0 is actually the previous content of S1, which is actually after the previous, which before the prior clock cycle was previous S2 and so on. That means adversary knows that the first n output bits of your LFSR is nothing but your initial state. So, that is the first piece of information which is now available to the adversary, which is now a significant amount of information for the adversary, and it turns out that the next output bits, namely yn plus 1 to y2n, actually gives a system of linear equations in the unknowns in the feedback coefficients to the adversary. Namely, the adversary knows that the n plus 1th output bit is actually related to the first n output bits by this relationship. In the same way, the 2nth output bit is actually related to the nth output bit, n minus 1th output bit and 2n minus output bit by the feedback coefficient via this system of linear equation. So, what is not known in this system of linear equations is the feedback coefficients, and how many feedback coefficients are there for the adversary? We have n such coefficients, and interestingly he has now n such independent equations. So, by solving this system of n independent equations, it can completely recover back the feedback coefficients. So, now both the keys as well as the feedback coefficients are known to the adversary, and hence it can completely determine all the subsequent outputs of your output of the LFSR. That means, just by observing 2n output bits of the LFSR, adversary can completely break this LFSR, and hence no way it is actually a pseudo random generator. So, a method which is used actually to preserve the security of the LFSR is to add some kind of non-linearity. So, if you see the attack or the strategy which is used by the attacker here is to exploit this system of linear equation, or namely the attacker uses the fact that the feedback is actually a linear function of the subset of the register. So, one way to get around this is to add some kind of non-linearity in the feedback shift register, and there are several ways of introducing non-linearity in the construction of feedback shift register. The first method of adding the non-linearity is to ensure that your feedback itself is non-linear. Namely, what we assume here is that the next state SIT plus 1, the content of the ith register at the clock cycle t plus 1 will be the content of the I plus 1th register at the clock cycle t. That means, everything is still shifted by one position after every clock cycle, but the content of the last register is now a non-linear function of the current registers. So, in the previous construction in the LFSR function, the function g was actually a linear function, but the proposal here is that instead of ensuring that the feedback is a linear function, the feedback is now going to be a non-linear function of the set of bits which are there in the current register. So, that is one way of adding non-linearity, which is followed in the modern constructions of pseudo random generators based on feedback shift register. The other way of adding non-linearity is to add non-linearity in the output itself, right. So, till now we are discussing the case where output is actually the content of the current S0, where S0 is the value of S1 in the previous clock cycle and so on, and in every clock cycle everything gets shifted by one position. But I could have another way of determining the output, where the output is actually a non-linear function, And there are two ways actually to determine nonlinear combination generators. Variant 1 is the following, where we still use single LFSR, right, where everything gets shifted by one position and we have a linear feedback, but instead of just ensuring that S0 is the output bit turns out to be a nonlinear function of the current register. And the variant 2 is, instead of using one LFSR, we will now have several LFSR, preferably of different degrees, and the overall output bit of the combined LFSR will be a complicated nonlinear function of the output bit of the individual LFSR. So, that is the second variant. So, that means to add nonlinearity you have two options, nonlinearity in the feedback, nonlinearity in the output. Nonlinearity in the output can be achieved in two ways, just use one LFSR and the output being a complicated nonlinear function. Option 2, use several LFSR and the output is the nonlinear complicated nonlinear function of the output of the individual LFSR. And it turns out that the modern constructions of PRGs based on LFSR indeed use these principles. So, here is a candidate construction based on LFSR, which is called Trivium, and it is a highly popular instantiation of pseudo random generator. And it is basic, if you see pictorially, it is actually a combination of three feedback shift registers. So, you have the first shift back FSR consisting of 93 registers, which we denote as the feedback shift register A. Then you have the next FSR, which we denote as B, consisting of 84 registers, and then we have the next feedback shift registers, say the C feedback shift register consisting of 111 registers. Now, the reason why they are using 93, 84, 111 we do not know actually, it is a design principle used by the designers of the Trivium, right. So, there are some well known principles which are used to select the value of FSR A, FSR B, FSR C like that, but otherwise in general there are no fixed guidelines which are used to select the size of FSR A, FSR B, FSR C to be like this, right. And now you see that each FSR has an individual output. So, if I consider the FSR A, right. So, it is basically the XOR of the rightmost register, in this case the 93rd register, and another register of the same FSR. So, this is the first difference in the construction of Trivium compared to the regular LFSR. In the regular LFSR, the 93rd output, the content of the 93rd register will be considered as the output bit after every clock cycle, but now after every clock cycle it is the XOR of the 93rd register and the 66th register in the FSR A, which will be considered as the output of the FSR A after the individual clock cycle, and the same holds for the FSR B as well as the FSR C. So, that is the first way of adding nonlinearity here. And the overall output of the FSR is basically the XOR of the output of the FSR A, FSR B, XOR C. So, that is the second way of adding nonlinearity here. As far as the feedback is considered here, if you see for example, the FSR A here, now what is going as the feedback? So, the feedback is nothing but the content of S1 and it is basically a function of one of the registers in the same FSR and a subset of registers of the FSR above it. So, what I mean above it here is, as I said here that this register, the sequence of the first 93 registers is the FSR A and the next 84 register is the FSR B and the next 111 register is the FSR C. You can imagine this construction as some kind of circular construction where above the FSR A we have the FSR C, above the FSR B we have the FSR A and above the FSR C we have the FSR B. That is what I mean by above in this context. And the feedback of the FSR A is basically an XOR of one of the some of the registers of the FSR A along with some of the registers of the FSR C. In the same way, the feedback of the FSR B is an XOR of some of the registers of the FSR B along with some of the FSRs in the along with some of the registers in the FSR A, and in the same way the feedback for the FSR C is an XOR of some of the registers of the FSR C along with some of the registers in the FSR B. That is how we are introducing nonlinearity. So, the idea here is by making this complicated construction we are actually completely removing the linearity which was present in the original construction of the LFSR, and this is how the Trivium is designed, and this is considered to be a secure FPRG because after the development of this construction, we have not got any practical attack. That means, no polynomial time algorithm has been reported which can actually predict the outcome of the trivium if the initial state of the trivium is not known to you. So, I am not going into the full details of the construction, what design principles are used, why the FSR 3 FSRs used, their degrees are constructed like this and so on. If you want to know more about the details of such constructions, you can refer to any of the references that we are following this course. Now, we will consider another popular stream cipher or instantiation of pseudo random generator, namely RC4, which is super fast when implemented in software, right. And even though it was highly popular till some years back, recently several vulnerabilities have been reported, and that is why it is no longer recommended to be used for critical purpose. In fact, it was used as one of the standard in WEP, and after vulnerabilities were reported in RC4, it is no longer used in this standard. So, recall that any practical instantiation of pseudo random generator consists of two algorithms, namely an initialization algorithm and the state update algorithm. And in the initialization algorithm, the state is initialized, and in the state updation algorithm, the state is updated and the next output bits are generated. So, as far as the state in RC4 is concerned, the state basically consists of an array, and array consists of 256 bytes, and throughout the algorithm it will be ensured that this 256 bytes actually consist of a permutation of the set 0 to 255. That means, each of the values 0 to 255 will occur as one of the bytes among these 256 bytes, and that is why it is a permutation of the set 0 to 255. Okay. Now, the initialization algorithm for this RC4 is as follows. So, the initialization algorithm creates a key dependent pseudo random permutation of the set 0 to 255, and along with that it initializes two index pointers I and G in the range 0 to 255. That is the way initialization happens for RC4. We will go into the details of the initialization very soon, and once the initialization is done, in the state update algorithm, in each iteration the bytes of the S, which are actually a key dependent pseudo random permutation of the set 0 to 55, are shuffled around, and after shuffling one of the bytes is output, and that is the way state is updated. So, now let us go into the details of the initialization algorithm. So, the key or the key for the RC4 algorithm is basically a 16 byte key, which is going to be a random 16 byte key. So, we denote it by K0 to K15, and the output is going to be a pseudo random permutation of the set 0 to 255. So, that is a array S. So, we initialize the array S to consist of values 0 to 255 in sequence, namely the first byte is set to be 0, the next byte is set to be 1, and the last byte is set to be the value 255. That is the identity permutation, and now we have to somehow reshuffle the contents of the array S based on the value of the key array K. That means, whatever depending upon the contents of the key bytes, we have to shuffle the contents of the array S, ensuring that after shuffling the modified S still represents a permutation of the set 0 to 255. So, to do that, we actually repeat the values of the key and ensure that the key array becomes of size 255, and this is done by performing the operation Ki is equal to K of I mod 16, right. That means, we take the first 16 bytes and repeat it again and repeat it again and repeat it again and repeat it again to ensure that we have now an expanded key array of size 256. That is the way we do the key expansion, and then we set the initial index of initial pointer j to be 0, and once the pointer j is set to 0, for the next 256 iterations we do the following. We do the shuffling, and to do the shuffling we actually change the value of j like this. We set j to be the summation of current j and the summation of current contents of the ith byte of S and the ith key byte. So, that is how we update the value of j, and once we have the updated index j, what we do is we swap the contents of the current location of current ith location of the array S with the updated jth location of the array S. That is how we do the shuffling. So, intuitively what you can imagine here is this 256 iterations you can imagine as if the index I gets incremented in each iteration by 1, and in each iteration the index j is randomly shuffled around. That means, we randomly decide the index randomly set the index j depending upon the byte of the keys, and once the pointer j is updated, we go to that location in the array S and swap the contents of the ith location of the array S with that location. That is how we actually generate a key dependent pseudo random permutation of S. Why this is a key dependent pseudo random permutation of S is because in each iteration the value of j depends upon the contents of the key array, right. That is how the resultant permutation is a key dependent permutation. Now, once the state has been initialized, we actually now go to the state update and the output algorithm. So, in each state update algorithm, in each invocation of the state update algorithm, the current contents of the S will be shuffled around and one of the bytes is going to be output. So, the way it is done is as follows. Imagine we have the current I and the current j. What we do is we increment the value of I and then we shuffle around we randomly decide the value of j depending upon the current contents of S as follows. So, the value of j is updated in a pseudo random fashion by this operation. That means, whatever is the current index of j, to add we add the byte value that is stored at the ith location of the array S, and to ensure that we do the wraparound, all the operations are done modulo 256. So, by doing this operation we update the value of the index counter j in a pseudo random fashion, and then what we do is we swap the contents of the ith location of array S and the jth location of the array S. That is how we actually do the state update information, and to determine the output what we do is we determine a new index t, which is nothing but the summation of the contents of the ith location of the array S and the jth location of the array S, and we go to that location, the tth location, and whatever is the byte value which is stored there, that is the byte value which we are going to output. That is the way we do the state update information, state update of the array S, and that is the way we compute the output byte value in each iteration of the state update algorithm, right. So, now let us discuss about the insecurity of RC4 algorithm. So, you can see if you see the pseudo code of the state update algorithm and the initialization algorithm, you can see that we are not doing any complicated operation. That is why this algorithm is super fast when you implement it in software, right, and that is why it was highly popular till people started reporting vulnerabilities in the security of RC4. So, we want to analyze here that whether indeed RC4 is a candidate pseudo random number generator or not. So, as you see, if you recall that in each iteration of the state update, RC4 outputs a byte. So, what we have to compare is the RC4 byte generator algorithm with a true random byte generator algorithm, right. A true random byte generator algorithm will produce any byte in the set 0 to 255 uniformly randomly, and the expected outcome from the RC4 is that in each invocation of the state update algorithm, the output byte should be almost like a uniformly random value from the set 0 to 255. It turns out that in one of the previous work, Mantin and Shamir showed that even if we assume that the initialization of algorithm of the RC4 is a uniform initialization, that means it does not depend upon the key algorithm. That means we assume that the initialization algorithm produces a uniformly random state S consisting of a uniformly random permutation, and assuming that also what Mantin and Shamir showed is that if we start running the state update algorithm, then the second output byte of RC4 is more likely to be 0. That means, the probability that the second output byte of RC4 is 0 is 2 over 256 compared to 1 over 256, and this can be proved formally. So, if you want to see the exact formal details that how exactly this probability is derived, you can refer to one of the references that we are following. So, assuming that this is the case, then here is a very simple RC4 distinguisher who can distinguish apart a sample y generated from the RC4 byte generator from a sample which is generated by a truly random byte generator, right. So, imagine the distinguisher is given a byte y and it has to determine whether it is produced by the RC4 byte generator or a true random byte generator. So, what the distinguisher does, since it knows the result of Mantin and Shamir, what it does is it just checks the second byte of y, and if the second byte of y turns out to be 0, then it labels that the sample y is generated by the RC4 byte generator, otherwise it labels the sample y to be generated by a truly random byte generator. Now, let us calculate the distinguishing advantage of the distinguisher that we have designed. If indeed the sample y, which is a sequence of bytes generated by the RC4 byte generator, is given to the distinguisher, then the probability that indeed the second byte is 0 is 2 over 256, right. So, that probability our distinguisher will output randomly will output a sample generated by the RC4 as the outcome of RC4. Whereas, if the sequence of bytes is generated by a truly random byte generator is given to the distinguisher, then the probability that its second byte is 0 is actually 1 over 256. That means, in that case only, with that much probability only, our distinguisher will end up labeling a true random sequence of bytes to be an outcome of an RC4. So, what is the distinguishing advantage of the attacker in this case? Well, the absolute difference is 1 over 256, which is a significant probability. That means, we can no longer claim that the sequence of bytes which are generated by the RC4 byte generator is close to the sequence of bytes which a truly random byte generator would have produced, and that is why this RC4 is no longer considered as secure. So, that brings me to the end of this lecture. In this lecture, we have seen on a very high level some of the practical instantiations of pseudo random generator, namely we have seen a construction based on the hardware, which we call as the linear feedback shift register. So, the original linear feedback shift register is no longer used in the form it was proposed, because by observing polynomial number of output bits, the adversary can find out the entire state as well as the feedback coefficients, and hence it can predict all the subsequent output bits of the LFSR. So, that is why the modern instantiations of pseudo random generators based on the feedback shift register introduces some kind of non-linearity, which can be done by several ways. Non-linearity in the form of non-linear feedback coefficients, non-linear output bits, and so on. So, we discussed a construction called Trivium based on that principle, and the second construction that we saw is the software construction, which can be implemented in software and it will be very super fast, namely RC4. Unfortunately, we also saw some of the vulnerabilities which have been reported in RC4, due to which it is no longer recommended to be used. That brings me to the end of this lecture. I hope you enjoyed this lecture. Thank you.